and welcome. You're listening to the X22 Report. My name is Dave, and this is episode 580, and today's date is January 31st, 2015, and the title of this episode is The Current Economic Collapse News Brief. Let's get right into the economic collapse news. Now, we understand the central bankers around the world, and every single government, they don't want to admit when their economies are failing, when things are not going their way, and when actually the country entered a recession/depression. They try to avoid telling everyone that they're in a recession or headed in that direction. And we're starting to see this out in Canada. Yesterday I reported that Canada, unexpectedly, their GDP had gone down by 0.2%, but we're also seeing that manufacturing declined by 1.9% in November. And there's a lot of financial publications coming out there saying that Canada is slipping into a recession at this point. Now, we understand the United States is already in a recession. Actually, it has never left the recession. Actually, what I'm thinking is that we are in a depression. I mean, the unemployment rate here is skyrocketing, and I'm not talking about the 5.6% that the government likes to give us, which is completely manipulated. That is a number to keep their illusion alive. We're looking at the real economic indicators, and we're looking at Europe, we're looking at Canada, we're looking at Australia, and many other nations. And when we look at what's really going on, we see a lot of these nations have already slipped into a recession. And again, this is what we've seen back in 1929. A lot other countries slip into a recession/depression. And finally, what happens? The United States declines. It falls. It implodes, and we're seeing the same thing occur right now. It is not getting better. I reported on this every single day, and we can see by what's going on is we are headed down that path. Now, we're seeing a lot of protests around the world. We're seeing it in Ireland. We're seeing it in Spain. We're seeing it in London. And it's being driven by Greece at this point. Tens of thousands of people across Ireland marched against the country's austerity policies on Sunday, protesting increases in water bills. They're really angry there. In Spain, in Madrid, there's an anti-austerity party going on right there. And this is being spread around the globe. They're watching Greece very, very carefully. In London, England, thousands of people have taken part in the March for Homes in London to demand solution to the escalating housing crisis. Demonstrators carried banners reading "People before profits" and "Build council homes, take the wealth of the 1%. And again, we're starting to see why all these countries are putting together a police force to handle civil disobedience. And this is what happens, and we can tell by looking back in history, when the wealth inequality continually separates the very wealthy from the poor, the people start to say, you know what? We have had enough, and we can't take this. And it starts out with protests, with them going out there saying, we want a change. We do not want to live like this. The middle class, as we know, is completely disappearing, and the wealthy are getting wealthier. The middle class, the poor, are getting poorer. And as time goes on, the wealthy realize, the central bank system realizes, the governments realize that these people will eventually rise up because they have nothing to lose anymore. And this is why the wealthy already have their escape routes. This is why the governments are training their police forces for civil disobedience. And we can see this is happening in every single one of these countries. And they're also putting into place laws that will stop people speaking out freely from protesting. And we can see they are trying to control the situation. But can they control this? No, they can't. And what are they trying to do? They're trying to lock down the flow of information. I mean, right now, England, the British Army, may use internet trolls to conduct psychological warfare. Now, we can see right now that a lot of countries do this. They're trying to control the internet. They place trolls all over the place in YouTube, on Facebook, and Twitter, and they try to control the situation. Well, the British Army, they're going to create this special internet trolling brigade, which will be skilled in waging psychological warfare suited for the modern information era, and operate through a spate of online forums such as Facebook, Twitter, and this is coming out of the British Ministry of Defense, which stated that the new unit has been formed to respond to the ever-changing character of modern conflict and to be able to compete with the agile and complex adversaries. Basically what they're doing is they're locking down the internet, they're locking down the flow of information, and they're creating these internet armies to do so. We see it happening in Ukraine right now. They're creating their own blogging force. They're creating their own internet army so they control the flow of information. And we can see on the internet today, this is quite impossible because news just gets out there and they do not like this. And this is why eventually, when push comes to shove, they're just going to lock down the entire internet and censor everything that's going on. This is their master plan. Now, we understand in Africa, the United States government wants to get into Nigeria. They want to get into a lot of countries in Africa because wherever China and Russia are, they need to be there because they don't want them to have the natural resources. They want control over the situation. And right now, since Boko Haram, this terrorist force that's out there that's in line with the Islamic State, and we already know the Islamic State is part of the United States, Israel, UK, and other countries. We know for a fact there was an Islamic State leader that was captured in Pakistan who spilled the beans and said, yes, the United States does pay us. Everyone that I get to go into the Islamic State, I get $600 per person. But we see they're using terrorism all across the world. We see they're trying to use it in Greece right now to keep them in line. Well, the African Union called Friday for a regional 5-nation force of about 7,500 troops to defeat Nigeria's Boko Haram. And again, the United States has been trying to get into Nigeria. The Nigeria government has been keeping the United States out. China is very closely related to the Nigerian people. And we can see right now they will do anything and everything to get into these countries. And if they have to push terrorism even further, they will. Now, out in Ukraine, we understand that Crimea voted itself away. It was not stolen by Russia. The people came out. The OSCE and other organizations were in there monitoring the situation. And the people said, you know what, we do not want to be part of this new government, which is a fake government put in place by the United States and EU. It was a coup d'etat. We have it on videotape with Victoria Nuland. We have information coming out saying, yes, there was black water in there. Yes, there were snipers in there, and they were shooting on the people to make it look like the government was doing it. We see right now that many of the people in Ukraine are outsiders. We see that Joe Biden and John Kerry have placed friends and relatives on the board of directors of the pipeline system inside Ukraine. And right now Crimea is saying, listen, we have an alternative to Visa and MasterCard. It will be up and running in May. Because we have to remember, from all the sanctions and from the rules that Obama put in place, PayPal, Apple, Google, Visa, MasterCard, they're not allowed to operate inside Ukraine. He did this in December of 2014. So they're making their own system and they're testing it out. It will go live May 1st in Crimea. Then it will spread into Russia. And you can see they're going to bypass everything in the Western world. Now we understand Kiev and Donetsk, Lugansk, they got together for a meeting of peace in Minsk. Well, the talks broke down. It turned out to be a blame game, and Kiev says there's no peace right now. Let's go with the war. And this is exactly what's going on. There were no new agreements. The meeting ending with nothing formalized, nothing signed, and it seems like the central bankers, the U.S. government, they are ready to push this war forward. This is exactly what they wanted. There are reports coming in that people have seen the Tochka short-range ballistic missiles flying towards Donetsk and Gorlovka, and they broke up in the sky. And these ballistic missiles can carry chemical weapons, nuclear or conventional. They have a maximum range of about 70 kilometers. And we can see the war is back on. Now, will they try to talk about peace and try to meet again? Yes, most likely. But we can see each time they do this, it gets worse and worse. The situation does not get better. And we can see the Kiev government. They are planning for a major offensive. Think about all the people they're drafting. Think about all the lethal weapons that are coming in. They're not stopping. They're pushing this as hard as they possibly can. Now, out in the Middle East, we understand the situation is getting worse in all the different countries, and we can see the United States government and Israel, they're getting ready for a major offensive in Syria, Lebanon, Yemen, Libya, Iraq. And we can see they need to set the stage to make everyone believe we need to bring troops into this area. And this is what they've been doing, slowly but surely. They're telling us that the Islamic State militants have seized a small crude oil facility in northern Iraq. They're also telling us that they killed a chemical weapons expert that was linked to Saddam Hussein. And we can see right now they're pushing this agenda as hard as they possibly can. Hagel is out there, the outgoing U.S. Defense Secretary. He has acknowledged that neutralizing the Islamic State, which the United States controls, we are going to need American troops on the ground with non-combat roles, which means we are going to go into combat. These non-combat roles mean gathering intelligence and locating targets. And of course, they'll be fired upon, and once they're fired upon, we'll see that these troops are no longer advisors, they are combat-ready Marines. We see Canada has troops down in this area, and they're being fired upon. So everything the governments are continually telling us that, no, don't worry, there'll be no boots on the ground, we see more and more troops heading over to Iraq. The number slowly creeps up, 1,000 here, 500 there, 2,500 there, and before you know it, we have 30,000 soldiers on the ground in Iraq. And you have to remember, they have already commandeered an air base from Iraq. They set up a division headquarters that can support 30,000 troops. They've been bringing in military assets into Kuwait to get ready for this major offensive. And we can see Israel is on the move in the Golan Heights area, and they're continually flying in and bombing this area. Now, the Islamic State is saying, and they put out a video, and of course this is coming from Site Intelligence, and this is run by Rita Katz, which is controlled by the CIA and Mossad, and we know that pretty much this is a setup. They're saying the second Japanese hostage has been decapitated. Now, I'm not saying these things are not really happening, but the information and the videos they put out there are fake. They're terribly done. And you have to remember, the Islamic State, they're basically made up of paid mercenaries. And we saw what these paid mercenaries have done before. They ripped hearts out of soldiers they killed in Syria. And we can see that they will do anything they possibly can, no matter how horrific it is, to push and get Assad out. And it really doesn't matter. And we can see right now that the area in Syria has grown since the coalition forces have been bombing. Now think about this for a second. These coalition forces, United States, the Arab nations, UK, Australia, Canada, are all in there with the most sophisticated weapons. And they're bombing inside Syria. And the Islamic State is able to dodge everything they throw at them. They're able to expand their area. I mean, does this really make sense to anybody? Of course it doesn't. Now, we see a document was released because of the Freedom of Information Act. And this document refers back to 1956, and it's called Plan C, which is the FBI created. The United States government made extreme top-secret plans for preserving national security in the event of a nuclear attack during the Cold War, according to documents recently released to transparency journalism organization Muckrock. The FBI created Plan C in 1956, and at this point in time, Plan C is still in existence. Plan C would have put the nation under martial law and allowed nearly 13,000 people to be detained for having links to other organizations, subversive organizations, extremist organizations. So you can see where this is going. And back then, 13,000 people was a lot. Today would probably most likely be in the millions. So what they were doing back then, they were making lists of people who they would go after during martial law. Plan C would have gone into effect after a war has begun in which the U.S. is involved or may become involved prior to an actual attack on the U.S. itself, according to these documents. And we can see this is where the lists have come from. When everyone talks about, and I myself talk about these lists, well, they were doing it back in 1956, and this was Plan C. And it's, from everything we can see right now, it's still in existence. Martial law if there was some type of nuclear attack. They would go after those organizations that would be a threat to their authority. And we can see from today, from the spying from the NSA, DHS, and FBI, from facial recognition, from iris scans, DNA capturing, from social profiling, from all the metadata, we can see today they're continually making these lists up. Yesterday I mentioned that MIT did an experiment to see if metadata, if you could take it and find out who people are. And they're saying just with 4 purchases they were able to do it. Now, of course, people are saying to themselves, well, wait a minute. If I went out and I bought toothpaste, bread, and toothpicks, or anything else like that, or beer, how can they know it's me just by using my card? Because you have to remember, a lot of these things are hooked up to social media. Now, I'm not saying everyone's using it, but your phone tells you where you are. It checks in with Facebook. Some people use Facebook your phones to purchase items, which gives the time, the date, the location, exactly where you are. They can use other social media platforms, Instagram, LinkedIn, and many others. And they can triangulate and figure out using algorithms. He made a purchase here. Facebook is showing him that this person was in this store. It's linked up to this account. I know who the person is. So you can see how all this is intertwined, and the NSA has backdoors into every single thing. Think about it for a second. They know what's going on. They're getting ready. They're getting prepared. They know eventually they will start this war. They will push it as hard as they can because the collapse is coming. And we know it is. They know it is. And it's accelerating. It's getting worse as time goes on. The more times they come out and they tell you that we're in a recovery, that things are better, and they can say this over and over and over many, many times, we know we are getting very, very close because they're trying to convince you as hard as possible to show you that we are in a recovery and this other group or country or a combination of both has collapsed the system. So they need to convince everyone and keep it up to the very, very end. Listen, everyone, thanks a lot for listening. Be well, be safe, and especially be prepared. Thanks a lot.